Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to another edition of the Primetime Rundown right here on the Eastern Observer. Alongside my guys Ian Schraier and Rob DeLuca, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We are extremely grateful to have our good friend DB in the house. Dennis Bernstein, ladies and gentlemen, the co-host of the Hot Stove Saturday mornings on NHL Network Radio, Sirius XM Channel 91, with another good friend of ours, the Fourth Period's Dave Pagnotta and Ryan Payton. DB, welcome back, sir. Good to see you. How are things on your side of the country?
Double J, Ian, Rob, great to be with you. Everything's great, right? What a nuts last 10 days or so. Trades, signings. It's not quite the NBA or MLB, but a lot of activity, and happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, really, really crazy stuff to see throughout the first day of free agency. We got to see yesterday nearly if I'm not mistaken, I think it was nearly almost it broke records in terms of how much spending was done on the first day of free agency.
I think
yesterday.
It was 720 million.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say around like 600, but yeah, there you go. So around 720 million, as our good friend DB says. But ladies and gentlemen, for those that are just joining us for the first time, thank you very much for tuning in. It's going to be a fun-filled episode, obviously with DB on hand. We're gonna have FanSided's Vinny Parisi later on, as well as Andrew Gross, who covers the New York Islanders for Newsday as well. So let's get things started here on the Primetime Rundown NHL Free Agent Frenzy Special. DB, on your side of the country, Phil Deneau is now an LA King. Talk about really what he brings to the Kings and how that solidifies that center role for him. Figure what, 3 or even not even 4. I would say line 3 center.
Yeah. No, he's going to be a second-line center. I think that was the representations they made. I think that Stéphane Fossé, who's Phil's agent, went on French-Canadian radio in Montreal and said that basically Phil had a talk with Todd McClellan, and the commitment was second-line center, which they need. Yeah. Now, I've been and people say I've been unfairly criticizing Gabe Vilardi here over the last year, but it's pretty apparent that Gabe Vilardi is not a second-line center in the NHL. He's not good defensively. I'm not sure he can play at the pace. He's more – when I saw him drafted, he was more to me like a Tyler Toffoli. And if he can go to the right wing and score 30 goals, everybody will be happy, but he's not that classic second-line center behind Anze Kopitar. I know people are looking at Phil Deneau's 5 goals scored last year and one in the playoffs and saying you're going to pay, $5.5 million for a 5-goal scorer, but he's going to give Anze Kopitar reduced minutes. That's a key. He can take key faceoffs in the defensive zone. I think that's what you're looking at with respect to Phil Deneau. Was it an overpayment? Yeah, it was, to be frank. Now, remember, Deneau turned down $30 million over 6 from the Canadiens last summer. The end of this season, they didn't even make him an offer. So they chose to go with Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki as the 1-2 centers. New York, LA stepped up big time. They were the most aggressive, and they have a need here. And they've drafted a lot of centers, guys, but as we learn, if you play centers in juniors or in college, it doesn't mean you're a center in the NHL. So all these guys like Vilardi and Anderson Dolan and Turcotte, they're going to wind up on the wing. So you need an accomplished second-line center here. And again, he's not, Kuznetsov. Right? You could have made a deal for Kuznetsov. I think he has 2 years left on his deal. So I understand why they did it. Do I think it's an overpayment? Yeah, but they had to figure out the 2 seed. It was a black hole for them last year. And look, they also got Victor Arvidsson via trade. So I think, are they better right now with Phil as a 2 seed? Yeah, and I think the salient point for me is when you look at that division, clearly Vegas is going to win the division by maybe 20 games. Edmonton's done some nice jobs on the blue line, bolstering their blue line. But the 3 seed, I don't know, Vancouver, OEL, not sure about him. Calgary, they lost Giordano. Yeah. Seattle is an expansion franchise, and San Jose and Anaheim, I think. So do they have an opportunity to go to the 3 seed? Yeah. So was it a little bit of an eyebrow raise? Yeah, because I think people were expecting that the money they used $19 million. If you talk about re-signing Matt Roy and re-signing Follow and re-signing and bringing in the 2 acquisitions I made that I talked about, and also re-upping Athanasiou at 2.7, they used $19 million of their cap space that you would have thought would have been for a big-time goal scorer or Paris or Jack Eichel. But are they better today than they were 10 days ago? They are. They're not a Stanley Cup contender, but they should be in the mix for the postseason next season.
Yeah, it was very weird seeing a few moves, and especially I know Ian with his Chris Drury jersey on. I know he was definitely hoping for, or I mean, listen, it still can happen, obviously, with Jack Eichel, but I honestly really believed that it was either L.A. or Anaheim because of what Buffalo was asking for and what they're still asking for. Ian, for you, you're wearing your Chris Drury jersey out in Los Angeles. You know, this is a team that is on the rise a little bit, as DB just said. Still not a Stanley Cup contender. What do you see from DB's world out there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. My second question was going to go talk about Eichel, but I'll revert to talking about the Kings here and talk a little bit about what DB had already talked about regarding Athanasiou and also bring in a veteran name like an Alex Edler as well to the Kings.
Yeah.
DB, in your opinion, when it, for a team and really an entire division, what it's felt like the last 2 years, maybe with the exception of Vegas, that's really been in such a rebuild mode. You had mentioned that you feel that maybe the Kings can contend for that third spot. What is it, from your vantage point and what you see with the Kings year upon year over the last few years? What is the different feeling regarding the Kings? You're saying that you think that they can contend for that playoff spot. What's the difference between what you're seeing for them coming into 21-22 as compared to the last couple of years?
Well, I think the top six is better with Danault and with Arvidsson. Now, granted, they only had, if you look at last year's totals, 15 regular season goals to the line. It's not really a bonanza, and this was the 27th ranked offensive team. I just think more experience from their blue line. You talk about Edler. He's not a top pair guy anymore. A guy, Irv Kafar in Vancouver, who covered him for years. So there's a significant amount of tread off the tires. But if he's another option as opposed to Olimata to spell minutes for the two kids on the blue line, Bjornfoot and Mikey Anderson, that's an essential quality. They need a top pair LD. Ian, they do. Like, it's not Alex Edler. It's not the other two kids that I mentioned because they're more, second pair, third pair defensemen. They need that, and they will never get them. They need a Jacob Chicken. Maybe they go out, and since Columbus is in a heavy selling mode, maybe it's Zach Werenski at the end of the season.
Yeah.
They need that type of player. So there are still gaps here, and they're still waiting for players to develop. Quentin Byfield is the X factor here. Like, where does he go? Not because of that rule between the CHL and the AHL. Since he played more than 20 games in the A last year, he can go back to the A. So there's no rush. The other thing that it does with respect to Danault, you don't have to rush Quentin Byfield now. And there has to be pressure. And I asked Rob Blake about, is there a mandate from, ownership to make the playoffs this year? Because the trend was play the kids, go get younger kids, develop them. But now you sign a 28-year-old center for 6 years, and you sign a 35-year-old defenseman. He goes, the mandate's from us. We haven't won here in a while. It's been 3 seasons since they made the playoffs. This is, if they don't make it this year, it's 4. So, I mean, how long can you run a team and not make the postseason, Ian? So I think there are a lot of question marks. And to me, like, people were judging this team 10 days ago. I said, let's wait till August 1st. Like, they're a better team right now, but I need to see them on the ice. I need to see them in the preseason. I need to see what Todd McClellan will do with these additional players and how they line up to say, okay, fine. And the other thing, Ian, is you can't have regression. You can't have Andrei Kopitar regress. You can't have Doughty regress. And Dustin Brown, I think, had 17 goals last season over 50-some-odd games. That's like 35, 40 goals. Is Dustin Brown a 40-goal scorer this season? I don't think so. They're going to have to do it by committee, and I get nervous. That's the downside of this. Well, I think things are positive, and I think they got a shot at the 3 seed. When you hear scoring by committee, it means you don't have a legitimate scorer. And to me, you don't have the lights-out scorer. Like, maybe Brandon Saw would have been a better choice, right? So there are still question marks coming into camp, how this team lines up. So to answer your question, if they do make the postseason, what do they need? They need the new additions to play well and play better than they did last season. They can't have regression from their current core players, and they need they need a couple of players to emerge here. They need either a Byfield or a Kaliev or a Turcotte to emerge at some point in the season, and then they should be in the mix for the 3 seed. They're not a division winner, and they're not going to make a lot of noise in the postseason, at least this season.
And that's really something, Ian, I just want to interrupt for 1 second. That's really my biggest thing too, DB, and even DeLuca as well. And really it actually, you can kind of, I guess, relate to it with the Devils as well, because, both the Kings and the Devils are both not ready to compete yet, but now you're going out and you're signing these big names. The Kings with one obviously doing Phil Danault, trading for Arvidsson, re-signing Athanasiou, but for DeLuca here, obviously with signing defenseman in Dougie Hamilton to this massive contract. What does that really show? What is the direction here? Obviously, the playoffs are the direction, but as DB said, DeLuca, they're not ready yet.
They're not ready yet, but the rebuild through the draft has been the way that Tom Fitzgerald seems to go, because he doesn't like to trade his draft picks, especially the early ones. He uses them. Like, that's why we saw Chase Stillman get drafted in. But he had said he tried to look for the right deal for the 29th pick, couldn't find it. So last second, he just decided to use it, took Chase Stillman. But nonetheless, it's about the growth of the younger players. Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, they're all growing a little more. And management has said it, enough is enough with all this losing. So they're going out there. They signed Dougie Hamilton, great signing. What they need to do now, they're still looking for a top 6 forward. Tom Fitzgerald had a press conference today after Dougie Hamilton saying he's very intrigued by trying to get a top 6 forward, and he's trying. He's looking out there, and I think with Brandon Saad now in St. Louis, I believe all eyes for the Devils look towards Tomas Tatar to come in and kind of give him that veteranship, the experience. I think there's just 2 more forwards, a top 6 forward and then a depth forward in Tom Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
vault of ID, right?
Well, no, we still got him.
We
still got you, DeLuca.
Bad storm outside. I apologize, fellas. This will be in and out all night. But yeah, I do like the relation you made there, Joey, with the Kings. And I think that the Kings have seen, I believe DB can relate to this, enough is enough. That's why they're going out and getting guys like this, getting Edler, getting Anthony Ciu back, getting all of these other players.
It's
praying that Kopitar doesn't regress yet. As you said, Dustin Brown was on a 40-goal pace in a normal season, and at his age, you don't really do that anymore unless your name's Alex Ovechkin. So it'll be really interesting to see. I really do think the Kings have a shot at that spot, that 3rd spot, because it's no secret the Pacific Division's a little weak.
No,
so I think the Kings.
You're being kind, Rob.
Yeah. I don't see Seattle as a playoff team. The Kings have a very good shot to take that 3rd spot over them.
Yeah. So I think, to me, it shows, at least in New Jersey, that they're not afraid to spend the money. And when you look at, I mentioned at the top, they spent $700 million these GMs. Like, what pandemic? I think it's full speed ahead. Nobody's worried about spending money this year. I think they're a little bit more price sensitive. I think the more curious sign, to be honest with you, in New Jersey, is Jonathan Bernier, $4 million a year. I thought Mackenzie Blackwell was the guy. Why would you bring in JB? And he did well in Detroit, and he faced a lot of rubber. To me, that was the more eyebrow raiser, because Dougie Hamilton was the top of the market. He was the number 1 UFA on our board at the fourthperiod.com. So he's going to get that money, right? He's going to get it from somebody, Seattle, whoever. Like, to me, to bring in Bernier at $4 million a year. Now, I know there's not cap issues in Jersey because of all the young kids. To me, that was the more of like the head scratcher with respect to, I thought Blackwood was the guy, but when you pay a guy $4 million a year, you got to think he's going to play a good amount of games.
Yeah, DB, that's just it. New Jersey needed to reach the floor, and they're still not even there yet. They're about 850. Right. They're still about 850 short. So they're spending money because they can, but it's clear they're bringing in Bernier to mentor Blackwood. I think he is going to still be the guy, but I do the Devils have, I believe, 13 back-to-backs this year. So that at minimum is what Bernier is going to get. Is the second is one of those back-to-back games, and he'll get a few more. I think we will see about 25 games out of Bernier. They're not ready to throw Blackwood into that full number 1 starter of 60 games a year. They want to make sure he's growing properly, and as Bernier said, he's hoping he can attempt to steal the net from Blackwood, as to therefore push him to make him a better goalie.
Yeah. Ian, before I rudely interrupted you, please go ahead.
No, DB, this is a topic that Joey and Rob and I have really discussed over the last, I'd say, 72 to 96 hours, which has been about the premium price that teams are now paying for bottom 6 players. And coming from Montreal to LA, Philip Deneau was a bottom 6 player. I mean, the 2 teams that were the most interested in Deneau were the Kings and the Rangers. And the Rangers are certainly trying to fill out their bottom 6, especially on that 4th line that's been in shambles for so long. So with a guy like Casey Cizikas from the Islanders, who's still out there and still needs to be paid like a bottom 6 player, and we're seeing the years and the AAV, is that are guys like Deneau, Goudreau, are guys like that now setting the bar for how guys need to be paid, not just in this free agency period, but going forward for bottom six players?
Well, and I think one thing caused all that to happen. Tampa Bay's third line in the postseason, right? Gord, Goudreau, and Coleman, they were impact players, right? And they're not like Blake Coleman. And remember, Blake Coleman, and Rob knows this, Blake Coleman was a second-line player in New Jersey. He wasn't a third-line player, but he got moved down the lineup because Tampa's so amazing, right? They have such great depth. So it's a question of, I think, placement. Like you mentioned, Deneau is a bottom six player for the Rangers, and you look at their set with Mika and Strome, and they didn't trade Strome. Yes, but in LA, because it's a combination of things. Because you have players in the system on entry-level deals coming. Like if Phil Deneau ultimately winds up as the third-line center and he's at that defensive role again, even though he's promised a 2C, if Quentin Byfield takes his spot and plays better, he's on an entry-level deal. So I think it's the amalgamation of the three centers, how much they cost you. Right? You can't have three $10 million centers. You could have a $5.5 million third-line center if your second-line center is on the last year of his ELC at $800K. So that's the difference. I think that's what you're looking at. Not only that, Kobe's got 3 years left on his deal. You assume he's going to be at this level, first-line center, at least for 2 of the seasons, maybe not so in the third season. So, yeah, I think that – because I think we've learned one thing, right? You can't win a cup with 2 lines. And your third line, it has to be a combination of things. Like Cizikas, I know that Seattle's kicked the tires there. I think Casey, they're going to find a way. Lou's been very, very quiet because he's doing work. So I think Cizikas comes back. I think Palmieri is going to come back. I think Zach Parise lands there. Now, they still have to sign Pelech to an extension. Pulak is owed an extension as well after this season. So Lou's doing a lot of work, and he's very stealth about it. So I think to your point, Ian, is that you can't have pluggers on the third line. You got to have some guys with touch. And remember, on Tampa, I remember Anthony Cirelli was really a 3C coming up. And now he's a 2C. Of course, he's with 2 gifted wingers, like Killorn and Stamkos. So obviously his numbers are going to be there. But again, I think what happens is you got to pay your third line players more, but you must sprinkle in these guys on entry-level deals. Like if you don't draft and develop and keep doing that, it's a house of cards. You won't be able to do it. You'll have too many gaps in your lineup, at least if you plan to be a contender for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that's really.
Let's. I'm sorry there, Joey. I just want to touch base on probably one of the biggest topics between which coast is he going to eventually go to, stay on the East or come West, which is regarding Jack Eichel. And we've seen we saw Rasmus Ristolainen traded. We saw Sam Reinhart traded. The only piece really left in Buffalo at this point now is Jack Eichel. And I understand that the price tag for him is as high as it is, and what they're asking from the Rangers for him, and it appears that the Kings and the Wild, or at least based on the most recent reports, are out. So, I mean, based on your opinions and what you've seen from the Pagulas and what you've seen from the Buffalo front office, does Jack go anywhere this year, or do you think by opening night he ends up coming to the Rangers or elsewhere? Well,
Kevin Adams made a very strong statement today. So basically, we're in control of the whole process. He is until this time next year when Jack's no movement clause kicks in. You don't want to have Jack Eichel have more control of the deal. Right. So I think that, and I just think from an organizational standpoint, with all the strife and all the disconnection that you've had, do you really want him in camp to start the season? Like, you don't. But I get why. Look, here's the thing, Aaron. They can't blow this trade. They can't do another trade like Ryan O'Reilly. Right? They got nothing for Tage Thompson. Right? Tage Thompson's not Ryan O'Reilly. They can't do that again. They can't. So I get, look, and the asking price, as people know, 2 NHL players and a first-round pick or a prospect or the equivalent of 2 prospects. Now, look, the Rangers, once you trade Buchnevich, I don't know how you make the trade. I don't think there are the assets there. Right? And I get Sammy Blazin. My buddy Shane O'Brien actually loved the trade for the Rangers because it makes them tougher, with him and Goudreau. It makes them tougher on the bottom 6. That was a 25-goal scorer. That is a top-line player. You got to think that they traded for Buchnevich, so they're going to trade Tarasenko now, and they signed Saad, so I think he's out the door. So I think that with respect to Jack Eichel, I get why they're holding lines because they can't screw this up. They really can't. I mean, the fan base, every time I do a segment on radio or TV and I talk about Buffalo, I start with or I end with this. God bless Sabre fans because they're so damn patient and they haven't given up hope yet. But at some point in time, like, what do? You can't blow this trade in. So I get why he's holding the line here. He's hoping somebody blinks, but at some point in time, you got to lessen the ask. You got to move on from him and hope that the players that you acquire will make this a better team.
Let's move on, guys, to the next, just a little bit a little bit east of where DB is, and northeast actually, up in Edmonton. And DB, I want to start with you because Zach Hyman, Cody Ceci, Tyson Barrie, those three were obviously the ones that they signed in Edmonton, or rather, Tyson Barrie re-signed in Edmonton with an extension. And the thing to me is that at some point, the time is just tick tock for Connor McDavid. Is this the sign of Ken Holland saying, all right, we're going for it now, and if this is not it, then forget it? What do you see on this deal?
I think it's a season by season situation in Edmonton, JJ. I think they're going to try. They reconstituted the team. They brought in Zach Hyman, who I'm sure Connor McDavid will love. I mean, he played great in Toronto. He priced himself out of that market with his play. And he's 29 years old. He's not a kid. So he's there till he's 36. So I think it's just another way of a gritty player who's going to get in front of the net, and they're going to try this way. And then the left side is pretty good. If you like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or not, him and Zach Hyman on the top six on the left side is pretty darn good. Yeah. So, and not only that, we talked about the Pacific. They're clearly the second best team in the Pacific, so they can afford to roll the dice here. Is Connor McDavid going to get fed up if they go out again? No, but that's why you bring in Duncan Keith, who you guys didn't break up. So when you're down, 2-0 against Winnipeg, somebody got to stand up in the room and show some rings and say, hey, look, I've been here. We need to rally. So Duncan Keith, here's how I explain Duncan Keith, JJ. $5.5 million cap hit, right? You're paying $2 million for a third pair defenseman and $3.5 million for leadership in that room, which they don't have. Right. So I don't have a problem with that. So they're going to try again. I think they see the opportunity because, again, the Pacific Division is weak. They should be able to – can they get past Vegas? I don't know. But I don't think Connor's at the point where he's going to tap out. I think that he sees Kenny Holland trying. But, again, if they flame out, if they win one round or they lose a round or they get swept again by a nondescript team by Winnipeg, then maybe he does look for greener pastures. It would be a tough situation because how do you get value for that guy? You can't. But I think he's willing to be patient because he does see Kenny Holland making moves, but they would have to re-sign. Next season, this is the last season for Darnell Nurse. You can't lose him as well. So I think it's a season-by-season situation in Edmonton.
Yeah, that's tough. Ian, take it away, please.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that point, Joey, especially with UDB. In regards to, you said that, I think we've said it repeatedly already through the first 22 minutes of the show of how weak and how, the Pacific Division is projected to be. And that's the one team in this division that always bothers me is the Edmonton Oilers because the ceiling always feels because you have two of the most elite scorers in the league. You have the Hart Trophy winner, and they always fall short. It's year after year. I don't want to compare them on the same level, but they just kind of feel like the younger, less spending version of the Toronto Maple Leafs of the West. And they play in a much weaker division. So by you saying that they are the second best team in that division, should it be? I don't want to say should it be more than that, but has it just become a level of complacency in Edmonton at this point?
No, it shows you, Ian, that you can't win with a 23-man roster with two great players. You need depth. This team has never had depth.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure they have. They let go Kahara. He's going to go play somewhere else. So I'm not sure that middle six that they have. I think it comes down to their third line. If they could construct a third line like Tampa Bay did, I'd give them a lot more chance to do some damage once they get out of the division, right? Because again, by default, I think they win their first round game, and then if they get past Vegas, then you say, well, if they can get past Vegas, they're a pretty darn good team. I'm not sure that team is here yet because I'm not buying their depth yet. Again, This is another team. Let's see, because you know what Connor and you know what Leon are going to do, and to a lesser extent, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and I assume Zach Hyman's going to put up 20 and 30 on that top line. But it's what happens to their depth guys. What can they do in a big spot when you shut down? And you can shut down anybody, Ian, right? You know it. Winnipeg shut down Connor and Leon. When that happens, who's going to step up? And you saw for Tampa Bay, who stepped up? Yanni Gourde scored big goals. Blake Coleman scored a huge goal. Barclay Goodrow tapped in. So to me, it's that middle six for Edmonton. Will they be able to come through? And if they can, then they can make some noise in the postseason.
DB, I told Joey, and Joey, as we know, his favorite team is the Islanders, but his second favorite team is in San Jose. And based on the players that are on the roster, he believes that the Sharks are just in salary cap hell, and that there's just no ceiling for the Sharks going forward. I believe the opposite. What's your take on the Sharks coming into 21-22?
They're not a playoff team. I don't like them. I think they're too old on the blue line. I think they spent too much money on on the Carlson deal was terrible. Hey, look, they should thank themselves that they didn't get John Tavares there. You remember that was 91, for 7 for that 91 for 91. So I just think they're too old. I don't like the depth. I think I love a kid like Logan Couture, but he's now I think 32 years old. I just don't like I think what happened. And we again talk about depth. We talk about character. When Joe Pavelski left town, that was a profound loss that they never made up for. So I think they're also around. I know they got rid of Martin Jones, Aiden Hill. Okay, you think he can win you games in that division because it's the lesser division? Fine. I just don't like the depth. There was some talk about them trading Timo Meier. I think that's a pretty substantial rebuilding job for Doug Wilson at this point. And
the sad part is that I'll never forget when the Sharks made that deal. There were not many people that said, "Oh yeah, this was a horrible deal." No, I remember saying it. I don't like to pat myself on the back too much, but that one was really, really bad, and I was kicking myself, thinking to myself, "What is this?" When you're doing, forget it. It's a waste of time. It's just a waste. Guys, let's keep on moving forward here. One last topic with you, DB. Now we talk about Toronto, and to me, it's just we don't know what the deal is. Where we see Kyle Dubas in the most recent press conference that he had, or the most recent exit media day or whatnot, and it sounded to me like he was just going to just go with the flow with the guys that he had, and there was not going to be any shakeup. I mean, to me, you lose your captain in John Tavares, in the first round last year due to injury. And what do you see with this team? And now from what we keep seeing, and tell me if I'm wrong or not, but we keep seeing now that Dubas may be dangling Alexander Kerfoot when he just protected him, actually. No, did he protect him? No, he did not in the expansion draft. But tell us a little about what you see with Toronto.
Look, until they get a greater commitment to play the defensive side of the puck, they're not going anywhere. They got to win a round, and they're in a tough division. Like they'll win it. Look, they'll be in the top 3 in the division, but I don't like them in the postseason. Yeah. And they basically traded Freddie Anderson for Mrazek. Mrazek's hot and like he's such a streaky goaltender. Could he get on a heater in the postseason and carry this team? He could. And he also could get hurt. And Carolina didn't want him as a contending team, so you figure that out. So to me, it's just there's not. And you know what happened, guys? Also, they picked the wrong old guys. Like Montreal, they picked the right old guys. They went up going to a Cup final. It didn't work with Simmons and didn't work with Joe Thornton and didn't work to lesser. Jason Spezza acquitted himself well. But again, this is a team where, guys, it's just a repetitive theme. Like, watch your depth. Watch your bottom 9 about. Like, is it good enough to win in the postseason? Can it stop teams in the postseason? I'm not buying it. I just don't think there's enough defensive commitment from this team. I do like the coach, but until the mindset of this team changes for the postseason, they'll continue to do it. And coming off what they did against Montreal, going up 3-1 and losing 4, when a team they never should have lost to, I just don't think there's enough backbone and enough defensive play here. That I don't like them. I think they'll be entertaining during the regular season, and I think they'll be a pretty easy team to play against in the postseason.
Unbelievable stuff. Ian and DeLuca, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, no, DB's 100% right here. We see it from the Leafs every year. They dazzle you in the regular season. You're thinking, oh, this could be it for the Leafs. This is it. And then what happened? What do you know? Bruins in 7. Another year goes by. Another great regular season. Thinking, now this is it. What happens next? Yeah. Bruins in 7. If you see, like, mark my words, if it is somehow once again Bruins and Maple Leafs in the playoffs, just put all your money on Bruins in 7. Trust me.
And the Bruins did good. The Bruins made some nice additions.
Yeah, really did.
They're a better team than Toronto right now.
Yeah. But you know what? Now that you bring up Boston, DB, now they've traded, as you brought up, Toronto traded Anderson for Mrazek, but now it looks as if that Boston traded Rask for Linus Ullmark.
Yeah. They love him. They paid him $5 million. They love him.
What do
you think about that signing?
Well, it's called escape from Buffalo. Maybe you get away from the Buffalo Sabres organization. You're leaning on your scouts, right, Double J? That's what this is. You're leaning on your scouts. Maybe it's a Robin Leonard situation. Remember Robin Leonard in Buffalo? A lot of people didn't like Robin Leonard in Buffalo. Went to Chicago, did well, got paid in Vegas. So maybe it's the same type of situation. He's still young in it. And great, look, he's got a way better team in front of him too. So I think that they're rolling the dice a little bit, paying him $5 million a year. But again, this is a situation where Don Sweeney's leaning on his scouts. They like the player. And they think he can fit well with respect to that team.
Well, we will see what happens. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-host of the Hot Stove Saturday mornings from 11 to 1 on the NHL Network Radio, Sirius XM Channel 91, with the fourth periods, Dave Pagnotta and Ryan Payton. DB, thank you so much, as always, for coming on here and being always a good sport with us. We really appreciate you coming on, and obviously we'll see you soon.
Double J, Ian, and Rob, thanks for the time. Have a great summer. We'll talk to you in the fall.
Yes, absolutely. Have a good one, DB. Thanks again.
Cheers.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, of course, our good friend Mike Szabo is here. And Mike, thank you for coming on here with us here on the NHL Free Agent Frenzy show that we've always, that we actually brought up with you a few times. And Ian put me on the spot saying, did you invite him even? Of course I did. And now you're here. Mike, thank you for coming on here. And we appreciate you coming on here, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite, Joey. A lot happened in the last 24 hours. Lots been going on with hockey. It's funny how I said on the tweet promoting us, like being on the show today, and like, forget the baseball trade season. We got so much hockey to talk about. I guess Brian Cashman looked at my tweet today, but a lot of stuff happened.
You're such a liar, Szabo. Such a liar.
Yeah, I think it's all a smoke screen, but that's the conversation around the time. It's all a smoke screen. I don't care. I don't care if he gets Mike Trout. I want him gone.
I like him.
The other way. Got to point the other way. There you go. Mike, your New York Rangers, they really bolstered the blue line. They bolstered the bottom six. We brought that up with DB. You were backstage. We brought up Ian brought up about the bottom six and really how valuable they're becoming lately. And I know we brought this up. Ian and I had brought this up either last show or even off camera. When in 2013-14, when the LA Kings won the Stanley Cup, I should have brought that up with the LA Kings guy in DB. But when the Kings won the Stanley Cup, you roll all four lines, and the Rangers, unfortunately, were unable to do that in Alain Vigneault's system then. What we do know now is that the NHL is beginning to revert a little bit back towards toughness. And you heard what DB said. They try and replicate the Tampa Bay third line. They try and replicate the Islanders' fourth line. What do you see that the New York Rangers did, and they did so well in day one of free agency? Because I thought it honestly was an A grade for what they did.
Yeah, it was a lot of underrated moves, not really a bunch of big names like we saw a lot of other people being thrown around the league. It was a lot of guys who are underrated, maybe don't have a lot of flashy stats, but depending where you put them in a certain role, can certainly be big impact players. And like you said about how important these bottom six guys are becoming, you just see that in the playoffs, how much it is to have these blue-collar guys that are going to get stuck in, get you some big face-offs, get you some big forechecks. And that's been huge in the playoffs in the last couple of years. Teams are starting to realize it. And they realized that after they saw what Tampa Bay's done the past 2 years. I think the Rangers, they solidify themselves on some really good depth. Look, Dolan came down from his rafters, apparently, to go after this team and their front office because of toughness. That's the exact reason why that we saw John Davidson and Jeff Gordon both gone, because they didn't have enough toughness in there. So you obviously expected that no matter whether it was free agency or trade or whatnot, that Chris Drury was going to go after physicality, and he absolutely did. I think they I don't know if I want to get hyped up and say hit it out of the park, but I think they did really well with some of the guys that they got. Cap-wise, I think they did pretty well on the financials. I think they really tried to sell themselves in terms of depth to try and go after Eichel. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think they've covered themselves at the defense and forward position. God forbid they do. I don't see that happening anytime soon, but I think they added some real quality depth. I don't think you could be mad at what the Rangers did, put it that way.
Yeah, and you know what? And this I want to go with Ian last because he's got the Chris Drury jersey on, the general manager of the team. Honestly, the first person I know who buys a general manager jersey. Ian, great job there. You really can see the future.
He was playing for the Rangers when I bought this. Thank you very much.
You can't take a joke. This is unbelievable.
No, apparently not. They're Rangers fans. They don't have a sense of humor.
No.
It's unbelievable.
I'm just going to call you on your lie, Joey.
It's absolutely unbelievable. There was no lie because it was a joke. Unbelievable. Rob DeLuca, though, because so obviously for all of us here wearing our uniforms, our name and number T-shirts, or as Ian is wearing his general manager's jersey. He got that custom made, by the way. So, you know, and it actually, instead of the numbers, it says GM on the back.
GM of the year.
Yes,
not just GM,
absolutely.
GM of the year.
In his dream.
I'll tell you, man, Lou's got nothing on Drury.
No. I'm sure. DeLuca, because as we brought up, you know, I'm an Islanders fan. We are outnumbered here in terms of Rangers fans, but
sad.
I really cannot. I can't not give credit to Chris Drury and even the New York Rangers because, again, they traded a 7th round pick for Barclay Goodrow's rights. They signed him to a lucrative six-year deal worth $3.641667. That's a mouthful. You trade for Sammy Blais, which is obviously, I think, the one strike that Chris Drury had, which as DB said, he doesn't know really if that's enough to send up to Buffalo for a Jack Eichel. But then you also, on the blue line, though, I feel is probably the best part that this team really improved on. Patrick Nemeth, as well as Jared Tenorti as well. What do you see in this New York Rangers team that, I mean, has them pointing towards up?
What I see from just this past 24 hours is the Rangers are ready to get their revenge on Tom Wilson with all these signings that they have made the past day. So, because all they were, these are some of the biggest
Tenorti is for.
Offer. Jared Tenorti, Patrick Nemeth, bringing back Greg McKegg. It's like they're getting ready for opening night, where they do happen to face the Washington Capitals. So it's gonna be a dogfight that night. But overall, like you said, Chris Drury does get some credit. He's off to a pretty decent start here. I will not to any point defend the Buchnevich trade. That was bad, especially if it ends up landing without Jack Eichel. It turns out to be a completely wasted trade, and it will be very interesting to see how he'll have to respond to that if and when, and I do say when, because I think at this point it's more than likely Buffalo won't send him there, that the Rangers will start this season without Jack Eichel on that forward course. So, but overall, he's doing an all right job. You know, he's a rookie GM, brand new to the front office, so it'll be he's got a whole lot of offseason left. We'll see how he addresses the Buchnevich situation without Jack Eichel. If that is to be the official case, we will see how he fills that hole, because you lost about 25 goals right there. So you're going to have to step up and fix that.
So now Ian Schraier, because again, you're wearing the jersey, you're a Rangers fan, we're outnumbered. What do you see in this first day of free agency, or first rather day and a half of free agency, and what the New York Rangers were able to accomplish yesterday?
Well, we saw what the Rangers were trying to accomplish in free agency, and that was which they haven't done yet, trying to get that elite scorer, that elite player, which they were hoping is going to be Jack Eichel. I still haven't given hope on Jack Eichel. I still think that the Sabres are going to try to unload Jack Eichel before training camp, and I think even DB referenced that just minutes ago and saying try to get Eichel out of there. I don't think he's going to be the best for that franchise right now. I think even though he's got 5 years still left on his deal, this team, that Buffalo really, after trading guys like Risto and Reinhart, just need to start over. But for the Rangers, I mean, Chris Drury addressed the one area that Jim Doan specifically asked him to address, which was grittiness, which is what this team has been missing. I mean, you look at the teams within that Eastern Division that they played last year and lost to on a regular basis. You look at the Islanders, you look at the Penguins, you look at the Caps that have just gritty bottom six players. The Rangers don't have that. The Rangers' fourth line, and I'm sure Mike can attest to this as well, for the longest time, the Rangers' fourth line has just been a team of just real, like, guys who just rehashers, like guys that we need a fourth line. All right, we're going to pick him up at center, pick him up at left wing, pick him up at right wing, and we'll turn it into something. I mean, I'm not trying to take jabs at guys like Greg McKegg or Rooney or anybody like that. I just think that this team needs some sort of solid play out of their bottom six, and it's something they haven't had for a long time. I mean, and a coach like David Quinn, he kept trying to juggle lines. I mean, at one point he had Kreider on the third line, then he had Zibanejad on the third line, and he tried, messing every which way. He tried to make something happen with Hedl on the third line. I mean, look, I understand that they had to sign him to a 2-year deal because he's an RFA, but I mean, Filipino hasn't shown me anything yet, to say the least. So, with regards to getting back to your question, Joey, I mean, what have I seen the last day and a half? They're building up the bottom six, and that's the area that the Rangers needed to address. Yes, I agree with Rob that the Buchnevich move right now is looking very, very sour. But I still think if Eichel's not the play, they're going to start entertaining Tarasenko. I wouldn't put that off the table just yet.
Wow.
Very, very true. Joey, we'll take a look at the comments here from Jason Weston. Thank you for watching us, Jason. And honestly, he says it best here. The Rangers filled the need they lacked. They have a young team of skill players, no sandpaper grinding players with any real NHL experience. Drury just fixed that in a week. And you know what? He's right. I will say they absolutely did take care of that need. But to what I was saying personally is, how many do you really need? Because they just picked up 4 in the past week. So it's how much.
You'll have to ask Tom Wilson that on opening night.
Yeah, well apparently we really are going to ask Tom Wilson that on opening night, Mike. And then Joey, if you could pull up Jason's second comment here. Now the young skilled players can move up the lines and let the down and dirty guys do their job in the bottom six. Scoring wasn't the worst part of the Rangers game last season, and he's absolutely right. I think he basically bounced off what Ian said there.
Well, I think to his point about and I'm sorry to cut you off there, Rob. I think that's the point about saying about the bottom six, I don't think they're all going to be kind of like, I think you're going to see Gaudreau center that line as of right now unless they bring in an Eichel to center the top line and then shift everybody down. That line is still going to be a combination of maybe Gaudreau, if the kids again struggle, maybe you see Gaudreau centering Lafreniere and Kakko. Maybe you see, I think to start off, you're going to see Gaudreau centering probably Kravtsov and Hedl. Would probably the best way to describe probably the opening, their third line come opening night, if I had to guess at it. So I think right now they did a good job addressing fourth line. They need stability there. They need that fourth line to contribute serious minutes. Instead of just being a line that comes out that plays very sparingly. I think they need to take a page out of Lou Lamoriello in the Islanders book when it comes to the fourth line. I know it's very rare to get a fourth line like that, but they need to aim that way because that's the way the NHL is played right now. You can't be. We saw it in the Stanley Cup final in 2014 with the Kings and the Rangers. Everything's been trending that way for a while. The Rangers need to copy that trend so many years later.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And while we're on the topic of the New York Rangers, a little bit of breaking news here on the Eastern Observer. It looks like now former New York Ranger defenseman and failed right-wing experiment Brendan Smith is on his way to the Carolina Hurricanes for a 1-year deal. And, with Brendan Smith, Ian or Mike, we'll go to you here. It was a very interesting ride with Brendan Smith, I guess you can say, trying to find room for him on the blue line. Couldn't, so you tried to convert him into a winger. And we all saw how that experiment went. So what do you see this doing for Carolina, really?
Do we have to remember that failed experiment again? I think for Carolina,
third line winger Brendan Smith. But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think for just Carolina, it's just another guy in there bolsters some more on their blue line. Try and maybe a little bit of a project and try and rebuild him a little bit and plug him in there somewhere, probably in the second or third line, something like that. Interesting to see, like Brendan Smith and Tony DeAngelo over there. I think that might be a little bit.
Don't forget Brady Shea's. Don't forget Brady Shea's there too.
How about Jesper
Fox? Rangers down there.
How about Antti Ranta?
That might be a little bit awkward in that room.
Rangers South, the new Rangers South, right?
Yeah, no, it went from Tampa Bay being Rangers South that's moving now to Carolina, I guess.
They're moving up.
I want to show this third comment real
yeah.
quick, guys, from Jason, which says the Rangers essentially had none last year. The bottom six was all young players cracking the lineup. Kravtsov and Kakko really had no business getting fourth line minutes. Yeah, you're right, but also at the same time, I mean, listen, Kakko is still so young, and obviously Lafreniere was in his first year. But you know, they need to keep those guys. You know, I think they need to keep Kakko and Lafreniere at this point with Kreider. And I'm not the biggest Chris Kreider fan. I really think that they should have paid Buchnevich instead of paying Kreider. I think they're going to regret that decision. I understand that he's a leader and he's been there with the team now for the better part of 10 years. And maybe, he deserves to wear the A as he does, but he misses the net a whole lot for a guy who wears the A. Nevertheless, no, I think your point is right on, is right on. And I think that it's going to be very important that you're going to see Kravtsov getting third line minutes, Kakko getting top or second line minutes, and you just need to continue to get these kids exposure. Agreed with you 100%.
If it wasn't for the Buchnevich trade, honestly, it would have been a really good free agency window for them, because otherwise, they didn't go out and get Denal. So it's like, what's the plan at center, really? You traded Buchnevich, and now you stockpiled all this depth and bottom six guys. Maybe it's going to cover you for an Eichel trade, but that's no easy fix. I mean, who you're going to give up? I mean, is it going to be Kravtsov or Hedel? And then are Buffalo going to ask for Lundqvist or Zach Jones? You have to think about what the draft capital is going to be like. So that's a complicated situation, but I think if it wasn't for the Buchnevich trade, I think they would have done really well. I think a lot of people will probably just feel soured by the Buchnevich trade, that it probably soured the free agency window a little bit. But I think they got exactly what they needed in terms of, blue-collar guys who are going to do the dirty work. And now that you got guys to do the dirty work, like the comment said, you now are able to get Kravtsov and Kakko and Lafreniere the ability to be able to grow and focus on scoring more or whatnot. So I think now you expect the Rangers, whether or not they get Jack Eichel, let's say they don't, you're basically running out the same guys there at forward, no huge change there at center, bar Goudreau, and you're hoping that everybody else takes a jump. The bottom six guys sort of deal with that aggression and physicality problem, and everybody else, all those young guys, Lafreniere and Kakko, really take a jump, which is what they need on offense.
Unreal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do want to give you some breaking news that has come through the wire from our good friend over at the Fourth Period, Dave Pagnotta. Let us read a couple of his tweets here. Quote, Phil Deneau's 6-year deal with Los Angeles has a full no-trade clause in years 1 through 3 and a 10-team no-trade list in years 4 through 6. Alex Edler's 1-year deal with LA pays him a base salary of 1.9 and a signing bonus of 1.6 and includes a no-movement clause. Also, in terms of no movement and no trade, former New Jersey Devils legend Blake Coleman has received that 6-year deal from Calgary. And in there is a full no-trade clause in years 1 through 3 and a 10-team trade list in the final 3 years of his contract. And this is the best one here, in my opinion. Freddie Anderson's 2-year, $9 million deal with Carolina includes a 10-team no-trade list over both years. I mean, again, now this aggravates me, okay? And something that grinds my gears, and we haven't really played that in a while on our show, but really what grinds my gears, and I want to turn the page to Winnipeg. Not so much Carolina being cheap, because we know that. We knew that in previous owners, and now we know it now, especially with Alex Nedeljkovic being shipped up to Detroit for essentially nothing. And it's really unfortunate, and it's more on the lines of Stevie Yzerman fleeced Don Waddle, but we're past that. In terms of fleecing and in terms of no loyalty, I'm going to consider the Vegas Golden Knights being the biggest suspect here. And the reason why we bring up that is because of what the Winnipeg Jets have done, and that's where I want to head to. The Winnipeg Jets just traded for Nate Schmidt. And the reason why, again, with Schmidt, he's been all around the league, it seems. He went via expansion to the Vegas Golden Knights from Washington. Then afterwards, he was shipped up to Vancouver last year when the Vegas Golden Knights just randomly popped in and said, "Hey, Petro, want to come and play for us in the desert?" Sure, sounds great. Okay, well now guess what? Now there's no room for Nate Schmidt, who just signed a nice shiny little 7-year deal with the Vegas Golden Knights. Not ideal once you do that. And then after that, then the Vancouver Canucks had Nate Schmidt for 1 year, didn't really work out too well, and shipped him over to Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg, in my opinion, has won this offseason so far, shoring up that blue line. Mike Szabo, I want to get your thoughts on this with Winnipeg. And obviously here, with free agent frenzy, there's not really much with Winnipeg, but so much on the trade front. What did you see with Winnipeg here? They also got Brendan Dillon as well. And really, ever since Dustin Byfuglien retired, Winnipeg's blue line has been, I would say, near Swiss cheese.
Yeah, I think they really made some interesting moves. You mentioned about their blue line. That's been a problem for a few years. They really boosted it. I think it'll be a lot better than it has been in years past. But yeah, I think they made a lot of interesting moves in this free agency. I think they've been pretty aggressive, and I think they've done well in a lot of their moves. They bolstered their blue line. I think they'll take a step up in the division, and moving into the postseason as well, they could be an interesting team. But I think they made some pretty interesting moves this year.
Yeah, you look at Nate Schmidt, you look at Brendan Dillon, and of course you still have New York Rangers legend Neil Pionk as well, who still has to be re-signed. He is an RFA arbitration eligible at age 26. We'll see what happens there. You still have Dylan DeMello, obviously, who has come a long way from Ottawa as well as San Jose. And now he's finally found a home up in Winnipeg. So really great job there, Kevin Shevladeoff. Ian or DeLuca, either one of you take this. Again, Winnipeg not so much on the free agency front. I'm gonna get again. I think they won so far. It's only July 29th. We still have another couple of months. What do you guys think about Winnipeg?
I think, Joey, that with respect to Winnipeg, I think what gets overshadowed a little bit with Winnipeg has been the regular season performance the last 2 years of Connor Hellebuck, and I think that kind of overshadows the fact of when he's had to stand on his head and make big plays. He's at least in the regular season, he's done it. I think we have been a little disappointed the last couple of years by their postseason performance. I think I still have a little bit of concern. I like the Schmidt move for them, but I think I still have a little bit of a concern when Neil Pionk is your starting top pairing right defenseman. But
alongside Joshua Morrissey, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to with Winnipeg is really that right wing spot with guys like Blake Wheeler and Dubois. I think you have to hope Dubois has a bounce back year for Winnipeg. I think they're counting upon that. We saw them bring Paul Stastny back, so that's definitely going to give them a little bit of leadership. I'm not sure what you can expect from the scoring column from him at this point, but I mean, he's still a second line player on that team, or projected to be. I think there's going to be. I think they still have to fortify some areas, at least offensively and defensively. I think Nate Schmidt's a good start. I think they've started to address that with some trades, but again, I think this team is still riding Connor Hellebuck a little bit because they're definitely weak in certain areas.
Yeah, that's really kind of where it comes down to. DeLuca, what do you think about this Winnipeg Jets team?
It's really an interesting team there in Winnipeg because they shocked everyone by sweeping Edmonton, but then they go into round 2 and they get themselves swept by Montreal. So it's an interesting team to say the least. They've decided to make a switch with backup goalie, allowing once again, as Joey would like to put it, New Jersey Devils legend Eric Comrie. They're allowing him the opportunity to be the backup once again for the Winnipeg Jets. So I think this will open up. I think what all that does is it honestly doesn't do much for them. Changing the backup goalie, that was not really a problem that Winnipeg was suffering from. I'll use what like our
and actually they kind of were. I'm going to interrupt you there. They kind of were. The reason why is because Laurent Brossoit, who found a home actually in Vegas behind Robin Lehner, was not really the best backup for Connor Hellebuck, and that's also why we got to see Hellebuck play nearly 60 to 65 games.
Right. And in today's,
really
tough. We talk about that 10 years ago. That's nothing, but in today's NHL, that's a big workload.
Yeah.
In comparison to today's NHL. So really but I don't know how much that'll really change things for Winnipeg. Really, their problem is, and I'll use something DB like to say, their depth. You gotta look into this team's depth, especially on defense. That blue line, as you said. I mean, look, Neil Pionk's a good hockey player. Let's not put that past him. Just because it didn't work out in New York, Ian, doesn't mean he's not a good hockey player. But,
no, I'm not. But
yeah, you can't.
I think you're overvaluing Neil Pionk as a top pair.
No. He shouldn't be a top pair.
He's not going to be anymore.
That's all I said. That's all I said.
Be a top pair he's a very good depth defenseman, but having him on top pair, that's gonna lead to some bad things by having him on the top pair. Morrissey
will no longer be there. I could tell you that right
Morrissey
now.
Morrissey is another good top depth pair guy, not necessarily top pair. So Winnipeg's got a little work to do. Obviously, losing Dustin Byfuglien was devastating to them in more ways than one, but nonetheless, I think Winnipeg will find their way back to the playoffs in the Central, and it'll be as a wild card, I would say, because they're going to get both Western Conference wild card spots. That's not even really
it's going to be Colorado, Dallas, and
St. Louis. I don't think St. Louis has dropped off. I don't think St. Louis has dropped off that much. Now. Considering there's going to be 5 playoff spots in the Central, yes, I am saying the Pacific Division is not getting a wild card spot. It's simply just not going to happen. That division's too weak. So you're going to see teams like St. Louis, Winnipeg get there, and Minnesota will be in the fight. But
Minnesota,
they'll be in the fight maybe. But yeah, staying with Winnipeg, they're doing very interesting things via trade. They've been very quiet. So in terms of, it's a free agency special per se, but they're doing a lot of work trading wise. So I would say definitely keep an eye on them. They're not going to be making any big splashes with free agents, but there could still be a couple of trades in the works.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And they still have another 15 contracts to fulfill before October 13th, which would be opening night here in the NHL. They only have 8 forwards on the on the books right now. Only 8. So they've got a few to do, but their clear need was defense because unfortunately, again, just behind Dylan DeMello was Neil Pionk, and unfortunately, it couldn't be done. You have to build some depth, and that's exactly what they did with Schmidt, Dylan. With those 2 guys, it's again you're beginning to really form that depth, and Winnipeg definitely gets my kudos for that. Guys, next team I want to go to is Seattle. They made a little bit of a different approach, and
that's a word for it.
Yeah, they made a very different approach, and the way it was from a couple of years ago was when Vegas's George McPhee, who now is the president of hockey operations over in Las Vegas. Vegas went for it all. They went for the big name guys. They got some really dark horse names: William Karlsson, Alex Tuch, Thomas Nosek, the Eric Haula. The list goes on. And for Seattle, we got to see last week rather. In the expansion draft, they went from Jordan Eberle, Yanni Gourde, Vitek Vanacek, who was just traded back to Washington, and now, yesterday, General Manager Ron Francis makes this weird move, and in signing Philip Grubauer to a big deal worth $5.9 million, 6 years. To me. What direction is Seattle going in, Rob DeLuca? I want to start with you here.
See, what I'm seeing in Seattle is hard to describe, really, because what's the point of taking someone in an expansion draft if you're gonna send them right back? That's what we saw with just yesterday, Vitek Vanacek, Washington Capitals goaltender. Now I guess you can literally he will now literally define Seattle Kraken legend because he was on the team for about a week.
Yeah.
And was before getting traded back to his original team, the Washington Capitals, for a draft pick. And it's because Seattle did make a splash in the free agency pool, and they got a prize goaltender in Philippe Grubauer.
Yeah.
Colorado Avalanche fumbling that deal with Grubauer now allows Seattle to swoop right in and take him at $5.9 million AAV. A pretty stellar deal for a number one guy. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of Seattle doing that, but I don't, because to me it just bothers me. This is my own personal thing. I don't like, if you're gonna take someone in the expansion draft, use them. Don't do that. Don't trade them back.
Right. Well, the thing to me also here, DeLuca, is that they're running short on centers as well. To me, it just doesn't make any sense.
There's not a whole lot of sense here. I mean, it's tough to say why
this is something that I heard on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio today, that where Alexander Wenberg to start the season because of Yanni Gourde's injury is going to be C1 with Jordan Eberle on his wing. To me, again, it just there's not a lot of
that's not a National Hockey League line one. I'll tell you that right now. Those guys are good NHL players.
Injuries, you can't
control them. But that's because of the route Ronnie Francis went, which nobody actually knows what route he's trying to take Seattle here in year one. Nobody is sure.
Yeah.
Because after the expansion draft, then it's like, okay, they're clearly gonna build, but then you go get Grubauer and you make a couple of other moves, and it's like, wait, are you trying to be competitive or are you trying to build something instead? It's very confusing. This is certainly not going to be a Vegas situation, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Ian Schraier, let's get your thought on Seattle before we get to Szabo and wrap up.
Yeah, I'll kind of wrap up my end on the Kraken quick because I feel like we kind of touched on them a little bit on our show on Monday with respect to the expansion draft. I think to Ronnie Francis's credit, this at least gives them a legitimate guy between the pipes now. I mean, this is a goalie who's a year or two removed now from really getting big money on the free agency market, in terms of the performance that he put up with Colorado. So I think for the Kraken, he's a 29-year-old goaltender who's entering the prime of his career. And I think this is going to, at least if he turns out to be the goalie that he was at certain points in Colorado, I think this is just going to give them some stability in the net. I mean, they have their concerns elsewhere on the ice, almost everywhere. I mean, we sat here on Monday and pretty much with a fine-tooth comb went down almost every pick and criticized just about every pick that they made in the expansion draft. So I think this is at least maybe to some extent a saving grace move for Ronnie Francis to at least try to, so many days later, call it a side deal move or whatever you want to call it, to at least go out and get a legitimate goaltender.
Mike Szabo, let's conclude your segment here with your thoughts on Seattle and the direction you believe that Ronnie Francis is going down.
Well, I think there was a little bit of shock at the beginning because there was talks going into the expansion draft that there was potential that they could have selected Carey Price, and obviously that gives you a legitimate guy between the pipes. Then they didn't. Maybe you go through the draft, you're not sure what they're not sure what they're doing. All right, they grab V's Tech there, and then we could maybe we made a mistake here. They realized in between, I guess, the expansion draft and free agency, they're like, we made a mistake here. Let us go sign somebody legitimate, trying to look smart and rectifying a mistake. And yet, we're all able to see what a mistake it was and how puzzling it is what they're doing. But hey, you're a new franchise. I guess you make the rookie mistakes now. So.
And this is, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Mike, but this is also what happened when Tyler was commenting with us, and he was saying how he liked all the moves that Ron Francis made. But then my comeback was also, if those moves were great, why is he in Seattle and not in Carolina? I mean, there are just certain things that it doesn't make any sense. And Chris Driedger also from Florida, he was supposed to be the starter. He had a fantastic playoff, a playoff series with Florida, and he would be the guy. Finish your thought.
Yeah, I just think it was very strange, especially in the goalie front. How they operated things. It seemed like, and I know I'm just focusing on the goalie part, but it just seemed you want to. And you're a new team. You want to build things out, and probably, as we keep on talking about, a pretty weak Pacific Division, you could legitimately be competitive in year one. Why not build out your guy in the goalie with an experienced guy with Carey Price? I think that's where things just started to get puzzling with, and it keeps on going down with each pick in the expansion draft. Kind of weird what they're trying to do. So I think that's the perfect word to describe it, weird.
Yeah. Well, we're going to conclude with that. What I do want to just say, though, from Jason Weston, Tyler Pitlick is the real legend. He lasted a day before being shipped to Calgary. That is very true. He really is the real legend. But then he comes back and says, Driedger must be pissed because this Grubauer deal, because he definitely signed in Seattle thinking he was going to be the goalie of the future. Yes, Jason, that is exactly why there is zero direction, because what are you doing? What is your direction here, and what are you trying to build in Seattle? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
We had so many questions, Joey, one of the first thing we pointed out post expansion draft was, what were they doing in goal? Were they really just going to be the team that's going to let up the most goals of any team in the NHL this year, or are they actually trying to build through the draft? We didn't know the direction. So at least, to a certain extent, this gives them stability between the pipes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Szabo, our good friend Mike Szabo. Mike, thank you so much for coming on here, and we will see you soon, hopefully, and, have a good one, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. Talk soon.
Absolutely,
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks a lot. So we are going to now bring in, Vinny Parise, who, now, Vinny, let me ask you this, just to pronounce your last name. Is it like Zach Parise, or is it Parise? How do you pronounce your last name? I think you're muted. Hold on one second. You're muted there. There we go.
Sorry about that.
That's all good.
People get me and Zach's name wrong. We actually pronounce it the same, but not a lot of people realize it. It's Parise.
Parise.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Well, now, first, just to give everybody a background of Vinny, writer and editor for Fansided, contributor for the New Jersey Devils for Pucks and Pitchforks, and he's also expert of Da Windy City for Chicago Sports on Fansided. Vinny, thank you so much for coming on. Sorry you're a couple of minutes late, but welcome aboard. Thanks so much for joining us here on our NHL Free Agent Frenzy special.
No worries at all. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you again.
Yeah, for sure. So let's revert back to New Jersey. And I think, to me, and something what our good friend Dennis Bernstein, DB, said earlier from the fourth period, he said it off camera to DeLuca, was have fun paying Dougie Hamilton that much money down the road. Vinny, I want to start with you here because you're a Devils guy, you're a contributor. What are your thoughts on this deal for Dougie Hamilton? And I want to then go to Jonathan Bernier after. Your thoughts, starting with Dougie.
Well, for Dougie, it's a great move. It had to be done. He was fourth for Norris Trophy voting in 2021. That's not the end-all, be-all, but it's proof that he's a very good defenseman. And the Devils don't have a lot of very good defensemen. At least they're trying to start building a group of very good defensemen. But you need that leader. You need that number one guy. And for at least the next 4 or 5 years, I believe Dougie Hamilton can be that guy. And if you develop Ty Smith the way we think that they can, if they develop Luke Hughes, we'll see what happens with Damon Severson. PK Subban probably has just the 1 year left. Beyond that, Dougie Hamilton's the guy. And you're paying him $9 million to be the number one defenseman. There are a lot worse defensemen that make more than him. And he's going to be the anchor of a blue line that they're trying to build for a long time.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan Bernier, though, this was something else to me that, you're paying a guy 4.125. And he's 32 years old. You're paying him for 2 years. Again, this is something that actually Ian brought up about Mackenzie Blackwood, even Scott Wedgwood as well. the latter obviously is not ready to be a full-time NHL goaltender, but the former in Mackenzie Blackwood, what is this again, the signals here on first day of free agency from a lot of general managers around the NHL? They put up one big giant question mark. And for me, this move with Jonathan Bernier was one giant question mark, saying, okay, this was almost the plan F, if you will. And we had nobody else to turn to.
Yeah, so the last 2 seasons, the Devils' record in games that Blackwood didn't start is abysmal, and their records in games that he did start isn't really all that bad. And, the team isn't very good in front of him. He masks a lot of mistakes, but it's getting better as time goes on. If Blackwood made a lot of money, if he was like 28 years old and making all the money that we think he could make in his career, signing Bernier to this type of contract would be a little bit of an issue for me. But the fact that he's still relatively cheap, you can pay a backup that you trust for 2 years. And Bernier was pretty good on a bad Detroit team, and he proved that he can be a good backup goalie to Blackwood for a year. If the Devils get good goaltending out of Blackwood and then turn to Bernier once every 3 or 4 games and he plays well, then they're going to be a lot better off than if it were Wedgwood or Aaron Dell or any Gilles Sen, any of the other guys that they had a chance to use. Corey Crawford was supposed to be that guy, and then he retired. So I'm all for it for now. If 5 years from now they're signing backups to that much money, if Mackenzie Blackwood gets his payday, that would be a little bit more of an issue.
Yeah. Now, they also have about another $600,000 before they reach the cap floor, and this is something that we discussed, or DeLuca had brought up earlier as well. But I'll ask you this here, Vinny, before I turn this to Ian and over to DeLuca, obviously. Do you foresee any other moves that Tom Fitzgerald would be making? And I don't want to say grade A moves for these power guys, but we got to hear that the Devils were in on some pretty big free agents, one of which being Brandon Saad. Obviously, he decided to go to St. Louis. But the Devils now, again, this is the part where I had the big question mark, because you're beginning to build and you still want to, you're not there yet. And you're going out and signing these, or looking to sign these top free agents, or quote unquote top free agents at the time. What do you see here with this Devils organization? Where are they going next? What would be the next signing, do you think?
Yeah, well, first I'll address the cap thing. What did you say? 800,000 under the cap, which sounds about right.
600,000, I think it was.
I believe about 600,000. Yeah, about 530, 600,000. Yeah.
Yeah, getting RFAs, Yegor Sharangovich and Yanni Kuokkanen signed will put them well over that. They're both still RFAs, and then I think that pretty much takes care of their current active roster. And then in terms of getting Saad, to me, the biggest thing for them is development.
Yeah.
And Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, the 2 guys I just named that are RFAs, even a guy like Jesper Bratt, guys that they believe in going forward. Those guys need to show progression, and bringing in someone like Saad might do that. So it's not always necessarily about trying to win, which obviously I think they're going to try to start to win a little bit, maybe not be a playoff team or anything like that. But I don't think they want to be the worst team in the league anymore, top 5 pick. I think they're done with that in their brain. Whether that comes to pass we'll find out. But if you sign a guy like Saad, you could put him on a line with Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier. And, hey, this is how we did things in Chicago. This is how we did things in Colorado. I saw a guy, if you're Nico, I play with a guy like Jonathan Taves, who we hope you become 80% of him someday, which would be a complete win if he became 80% of Taves. Like, I just think the experience factor and stuff like that can really help. If you put a guy like Saad with Jack Hughes, I don't even know what the ceiling could be.
Ian Schraier, take it away.
Vinny, thanks for coming on. We appreciate all your insight on the Devils. The one thing that I think that concerned Rob, as well as and I think really any person that follows the Metropolitan Division with respect to Jonathan Bernier is what type of message, I guess, even though he's there to be the backup, but he's spent much of his career as a starting goaltender. I'm not saying at this point of his career that he should be just a backup to Mackenzie Blackwood, but what kind of message, even though Blackwood is the starter on this Devils team, what kind of message do you feel a signing like this kind of sends to a future star of Blackwood stature, though, a little bit?
It probably shows him like, hey, I mean, this is how I would take it if I were him. you look at the record, like I brought up, when he doesn't play and it's bad. So it's like, hey, we're here to help. We want to win. We know you can't start every game. That's not how the modern day NHL works.
Sure.
So he could either take it as, oh, there's a guy breathing down my neck, or he could take it as, oh, every good team in the league has 2 goalies. The Bruins with Halak and Rask last year. I know things are going to be different going forward for them, but like that's just an example. If you have 2 good goalies, your chances of success as a team is better. And that's how I would take it if I were Blackwood. I'm sure hoping he takes it that way, because he does have a chance to be like a really good goalie. He started off on fire last year, and then he got COVID and passed it on to the rest of the team, it seemed like. And from that point on, he was just kind of okay for his standard. Like, he wasn't bad by any means, but for his standard, I would say it was okay. But before that, we were talking about Team Canada for this guy. You look at the players that Team Canada might have to choose from for the 2022 Olympics, and it's like Carey Price, Carter Hart, Blackwood, Binnington. All those guys will be in the mix. So I think getting a guy like Bernier could motivate Blackwood a lot.
I thought the move for Dougie Hamilton was just so important for the Devils. I mean, aside from those first couple of weeks where we saw the Devils really surprise a lot of teams that opening series with the Bruins at the Rock last year to open the season, especially. I think what we can't ignore also for New Jersey is, in addition to Dougie Hamilton and also the numbers that he also puts up. I mean, he's not just a good defenseman; he also puts numbers. He had 42 assists last year. And then adding to that, like guys like now that they signed like Ryan Graves and Jonas Siegenthaler, and then also still having Subban on a $9 million price tag for 1 more year. How important is it for a team that let up as many goals as they did, like the Devils? Granted, they weren't healthy at certain points, but how important is it now to have just some veteran leadership on the top 2 pairings for the Devils coming into this year?
I think it's so important because it helps the defense in that way too, but it helps the team as a whole. Their oldest forward is Andreas Johnson, who's 28. So, and the rest of them are all younger than that and like significantly younger. The guy that wears a C is 24 or 23, however old Nico is now. Jack is very young. So even on the defense, like you mentioned, Ty Smith, we'll see if we see Kevin Ball or Riley Walsh or anyone like that. Luke is coming down the pipeline. He'll play at Michigan next season. I think having leadership like that from a guy who's that good is very important, because as you mentioned, his analytics were really good last year. The analytic community really enjoyed his game last year. People who go by the eye test or whatever you want to call it, he had all those points, so he pleased those people last year. There's really not much to complain about. I do understand that maybe 6 years from now, that contract when he's 35 might not look quite as it does right now, kind of like a guy like Subban. But I mean, if they get a really good first 5 years out of it and the young players on the team take the steps that we think they can take, then I would say it'll be worth it.
Vinny, my last point here from me, I kind of have to break you in here with us a little bit and ask, considering your namesake might be a former Devil himself, might be heading to the island alongside guys like Andy Green and Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, and I can go on down the list of the New York Devils. I mean, do you consider yourself an honorary Islanders fan at this point, or what?
If Parisi signs with the Islanders, I'll cheer them on when they're not playing the Devils, unless it impacts the standings. If the Devils' playoff berth relies on the Islanders losing to the Flames on the last game of the season, then I'll root for the Flames.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yes, I will have certainly no problem rooting for the Islanders if Parisi goes there, especially. I like Palmieri. I like Green. I obviously like Lou Lamoriello. I believe Travis Zajac still has 1 year left on his contract as well. So you're right. The New York Devils, they're trucking along there. So
or the Long Island Devils, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
The New Jersey Islanders, one or the other. Yeah,
I'm thinking a trip from Chicago to New Jersey is in my future. I plan on taking a trip to see the first week of the season next year, and I think the Islanders will be on my slate if I'm in town.
Yeah,
beautiful.
No, it is true. DeLuca.
Well, Vinny, great to have you here. Glad we could get the King of Fansided on board with us here tonight. And, Vinny, I just taking a look at it, yesterday was a day Devils fans have probably not experienced since, and I don't even know if you want to count the 2019 offseason when PK Subban came to town, because it's a tough call, because that was just the one move and it seemed like a lot of good moves. But in retrospect, that day ended up actually coming in infamy for the Devils as it led to what we see now. And this day felt a little different. This kind of felt back in like 2010, kind of when the Devils were still that powerhouse. And it just kind of felt there's a glimmer of hope coming, that the direction is finally going the correct way, and it essentially is going to stay the correct way. So what do we think about yesterday, and what else do we have to do here in New Jersey to make sure it's fermented that, hey, this team's not going to mess around? Give it maybe not this year, but next year certainly.
Yeah, I agree with you. In 2019 with Subban, there were still some question marks. He didn't have a good year the year prior before making the trade. There were, issues in Montreal. It led to him being pushed out of there. Montreal's a weird place. I don't even want to get into them. But, in Nashville, he had some good years, but it had been a couple years. There were some question marks with PK Subban's game on the ice. It was awesome to have that guy come to the team at first and, what he brings in terms of excitement and all that. And there was also the unknown with like Gusev. We all thought it would turn out okay. It didn't really work out.
No.
John Hines was the coach. That was disgusting.
Yeah.
There's just so much more to look forward. Yeah. There's just so much more to look forward to now because Hamilton's coming off a really good year and he's got a couple really good years in a row now. He seems like he's fully developed, like what the Bruins thought they were going to get from him.
Prime time.
Exactly. And when he was a young defenseman in Boston and they were trying to win, they didn't have time to sit there and let him develop like the Devil or like the Hurricanes did, or even when he was with the Flames for a hot minute there. Like the Flames, they obviously thought highly of him. They gave up Adam Fox to get him. It ended up not working out for Carolina.
Yeah.
Or was that trade flipped? I might have that flipped. Either way, they thought really highly of him. And Dougie Hamilton just seems a little different than that day. And the Kovalchuk trade, maybe?
Yeah, the trade, exactly. It wasn't even a free agency signing. So it's like, when was the last time a free agency splash made it like this? Because, you could say Jaromir Jagr, but he was 42 when that signing happened. So it's
we considered it borderline sad that he was their best player that season.
Yeah. Oh, for the 2.5 seasons that he was a Devil, absolutely. Yeah. It was unbelievable.
No doubt.
But hey, a fun time to say you had one of the greatest forwards of all time on your team. No question about that.
Seeing him and Brodeur play on the same team was cool.
That was fun. That was fun for the hot second.
Yeah,
it was fun for the hot second.
Jagr will still be scoring goals with an AARP card, guys. Just like
that's right. That's what he's doing in the Czech Republic. He plays himself on the fourth line of the team that he owns, and he scores a few goals. But no, Vinny, I think there's probably two more big moves in Tom Fitzgerald's pocket. I would say it's a top 6 forward and a depth forward, and just pick the pocket here. Who you looking at?
It sounds like they're not out on Vladimir Tarasenko.
That's right. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing similar things, and it's
crazy. I don't know if that'll come true. I don't know if we want it to come true. That kind of has like a Subban type trade feel to it, but there's less term and it's less money. And it's a forward, so if he could snipe 20 goals, will it be worth it whether he lives up to being Vladimir Tarasenko or not? He'll probably score 15 to 20 goals at bare minimum. The ceiling is 30, 35 with that wrist shot. It all to me depends on his skating and all that kind of stuff. So that a depth forward, I actually agree with that. They're probably not going to sign another defenseman because
I think they're good.
They got the kid from. He's going to be their 7th defenseman. I can't even.
Yeah, Jaros. Yeah,
Jaros. Yes. And then Siegenthaler's there. Will Butcher's done. So
the defense, I think, is ready to go. Finally, for the first time in a long time, looking at Hamilton, Severson, Smith, Subban, Graves.
And there's guys that aren't even like in the conversation that could be like Kevin Ball or like Riley Walsh or Michael Vukovic. Guys like that could just come out of nowhere. So to me, you're right. I like the idea of a top 6 forward. If it's Tarasenko, maybe. Kyle Palmieri's not technically re-signed with the Islanders yet, and neither is Parisi. But we'll see if it kind of seems like they have had a gentleman.
I'm more of a if free agency that is most likely not signing with the Islanders, I'd say Tomas Tatar is out there for us to take a shot on. I think that's someone who could play on our top 6 and very consistently put that puck in the net, because the Devils need those pure snipers I don't think Alex Holtz is exactly ready yet. So until
no, and if he is, he'll play in the bottom 6. Yeah. But if someone's connected to the Islanders and there's complete silence other than being connected to the Islanders, chances are they're going to the Islanders because that's Lou.
That's Lou. So yeah, Palmieri's probably off the board. Zach Parisi's off the board. Travis Zajak's one of the names we haven't heard yet. And I'll tell you what, what do you think about this, Vinny? The Devils are in need of a third-line center still because that's a hole. Pavel Zacha needs to play on the wing. He's a much better winger than he is a center. So I don't want to see him back in a center role. So could there be a reunion there? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, anyone they could have play that third-line center is probably better on the wing, and I'm talking about Sharangovich, Kuokkanen, or Zacha. I'd rather see all those guys on the wing.
Yeah,
even though they could play center, as you mentioned. So
I do that to their development is what I say.
Yeah, and so I wouldn't mind seeing someone like what's his name come over, Travis Zajac. I don't think Dawson Mercer's quite ready yet, but if he took that third line role eventually, I would kind of like it. He's been really good in his junior development. He seems to score more hat tricks than he does single goal games down there. But I don't know. I like the idea of bringing him back if it's the right price.
Yeah. So I want to just interject here. And just a few minutes ago, Vinny, you had brought up about John Hines. And this is something that the reason why I remember last year when I believe it was last year when the Nashville Predators last year or the year before when the Nashville Predators hired John Hines not too long after they fired Peter Laviolette. And I remember when Rob DeLuca saw that, I remember he told me, he was just like, this is the beginning of the end of Nashville. And this was the time when Nashville was just about 2 years coming off of their Stanley Cup final run. And they were really good. They were very good. They were stout defensively. They were, and they've never really been under Barry Trotz when he was the franchise's first head coach. Amazing at at forward. It was always defense. And really that's kind of the way that Laviolette and the Nashville Predators, David Poile, those guys, they took them. But now that John Hines is in the fold, now we start to see the dominoes fall. And this is the part where I look at you, by the two of you on the bottom, and I say to myself, wow, did Rob DeLuca call it? Ryan Ellis, who signed a big deal in Nashville to essentially finish his career there, traded to Philadelphia. Matt Duchene is there. Ryan Johansson, there's rumblings of his name going around the trade stove, if you will. It seems to wonder, John Hines is maybe just that guy who stirs all this stuff up where, Nashville is really heading downward all of a sudden. And it all started with him.
Yeah, it's honestly crazy. They left Duchene and Johansson unprotected. And I was like,
well, that was also because of their ridiculously high cap hits as well.
Sure, but would we consider them ridiculously high cap hits if they were scoring?
That's fair.
Fair point. It seems like every time John Hines goes somewhere, their best forwards, their hands turn to stones, except for Taylor Hall. But Taylor Hall had Nico Hischier, who I believe can thrive with anyone. He's not, Connor McDavid, but he's so good at the little things that I think it helps a guy like Hall. But other than those two, pretty much every forward under John Hines underperformed to their potential, at least in my opinion. And the same thing's happening in Nashville. Everyone who leaves there seems to go find success somewhere else. Watch Eric Halla be amazing with the Bruins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but the same thing goes with Victor Arvidsson out in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
Or how about Calle Yarncroke in Seattle, who really was a fantastic player, making a very, very nice little lump sum of money, and who can also play on the power play and on the penalty kill. Not many NHLers can say that. Continue your thought.
Absolutely. And I don't know if Kevin Fiala played under John Hines.
I don't believe so. No, that was Michael Granlund who's still there. Yeah.
But either way, when Peter Laviolette wasn't much different, their offense wasn't great. And John Hines, it's just a weird hire because you went from Peter Laviolette to an extreme version of Peter Laviolette, which is John Hines. And we saw it with the Devils that at least once he was gone, they were able to score. They're still not a good team yet. Well, they might be. We'll see what happens next season. But Lindy Ruff, he wasn't this like magical magician, but at least they were somewhat fun to watch at certain points.
Yeah, really crazy stuff to see with the New Jersey Devils. But I mean, again, where and you brought it up with John Hines. Wherever he goes, some of these forwards are just they're stone hands now. Really wild stuff to see now. Again, Roman Josi, my goodness, he signed obviously until the end of 27-28, making a big $9.059 million AAV. Vinny, I want to end this here. PK Subban making $9 million. Is there possibility maybe that if there is that Tarasenko talk that you were bringing up, or possibly any trade talk, that he would be going back anywhere?
You're talking about Subban?
PK Subban. Would he go in return of anybody if the Devils were to make a deal?
I would think that the Devils would have to retain a good portion of the contract if that were to happen, which I would be okay with since it's only a 1-year deal. And like you said, before getting Kuokkanen and Sharangovich signed to their next deals, they're still under the luxury tax. They're still going to be way under the salary cap. And I don't really think anything's going to happen unless they make 2 or 3 really big Tarasenko type trades. I don't think they're going to get anywhere near the cap. So I would retain on Subban if that meant bringing someone back. And it'll be done after next season. But nothing would surprise me in today's NHL. Hall was traded for Larson. Wayne Gretzky was traded in his prime. Like, literally nothing would surprise me in terms of, like, I cannot believe that happened. But I will say the chances of it happening are less likely than other things.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Vinny Parisi, writer and editor for Fansided, contributor for the New Jersey Devils for Pucks and Pitchforks. Vinny, thank you so much for coming on here tonight, and we look forward to having you back on in the near future.
Thank you guys so much. Anytime you need me, just ask.
Absolutely.
You got it, Vinny.
Yep. Thanks so much. Well, someone that is very familiar to the New Jersey Devils beat, but really has now gone to the good side in the New York Islanders, Andrew Gross of Newsday, who covers the New York Islanders. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. Let's just get your correct nameplate up there. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me. I'm trying to formulate some joke since I've spent the last 48 hours writing about the impending arrival of Zach Parise. I was trying to formulate a joke to follow Vinny, but I just couldn't come up with it.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, so Andrew, you've been on the Islanders beat for a few years, and now you've gotten to see what Lou Lamoriello, we all know what he's all about, especially Rob DeLuca, just to your right, knows all about what he does, and it's just keeping nice and quiet. And we got to see what Nick Alberga from Sportsnet said earlier, that Casey Cizikas was on the Seattle Kraken radar, but now it's looking more like he's really, staying here and staying home, if you will. What do you see on Casey Cizikas' front?
Yeah, no, it's really a process of elimination. And I think the Kraken had that they had that 48-hour window before the expansion draft. I think that's when they first reached out to Casey's camp, and they may have revisited it after the bell rang on Wednesday. But when I say it's a process of elimination, reports like that have been so far and few in between for not only Casey, but for Kyle Palmieri and for Zach Parise, that it just seems very Lou-like, that he either has these deals wrapped up or is very close to wrapping them up, and he has put the fear of God into everyone, other agents, and just everyone. Because the way Lou operates is, and he's told agents or players this, that if he sees the story in the paper, the deal's done, the deal's dead. He won't do it. So he puts the fear of God into these players and their agents, and everyone clams up. But like I said, the fact that there are no connected dots. You haven't heard Kyle Palmieri's name come up anywhere. And honestly, coming into today, I know Brandon Saad went to the Blues, but really it was, Palmieri and Saad are probably the 2 top remaining free agent forwards out there. and you didn't hear a peep about Kyle going anywhere. You know, a little bits here and there. You know, this is the second time Zeker's come up in conjunction with Seattle. So a little bit of smoke there, but really, you know, you would have thought that Casey Cizikas, you know, given kind of how you know, after what the Lightning did in the Stanley Cup final, you know, or to win the last 2 years, how valued these gritty identity like guys are, you know, how they're being valued right now. Blake Coleman, you know, making more money than I ever thought he would make in the NHL with the Calgary Flames on a longer deal. I mean, twice the length of any deal I ever thought Blake Coleman would get in the NHL, right? And Barclay Goodrow, the other line mate, goes to the Rangers. At, you know, $3.6 million is nothing to sneeze at either. So you would have thought that Casey would have been sought after on this free agent market, and the fact that, you know, there was not a peep really just tells me that Lou has something in his drawer for all three of these players.
Yeah, it's really wild to not even hear a peep, and obviously, you know, as we brought up, you covered, say, if I'm not mistaken, just correct me if I'm wrong here, you covered the Devils when Lou Lamoriello was there.
Not as the beat guy. I would kind of, you know, I would help Tom Galletti out with the Bergen record during the playoff runs.
Right.
But I was doing the Rangers, but I'll tell you this. I talked, you know, because you talk about, you know, silence and everything. Madison Square Garden, you know, when I was covering the Rangers, Glenn Sather is a bit of a loose cannon in front of an open microphone.
Yes.
And it didn't take Dolan long to kind of shut him down. So we rarely talk to Glenn Sather. I talked to Lou Lamoriello much more as the Rangers beat writer than I did, you know, Glenn Sather. So, you know, as Lou, you know, whenever I, you know, kind of hint that Lou's been at this for a while, which sort of Lou takes as me calling him old. And I will say this, he's in twice the shape I'm in right now. So whenever I sort of go down that path, Lou never fails to point out that I've been at this for a while too, that we do go back together. So yeah, you know, a long answer there. Yeah, no, I've been dealing with Lou probably since 2003, I would think.
Yeah. Which coincidentally is the year that Zach Parise was drafted. So, Ian Schraier, take it away. You and your Chris Drury general manager jersey that you've got over there.
The jokes have not ended. And Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And I'm not sure if you remember me, but we've ran into each other several times when I was covering the Rangers for Sports Day at the Garden.
Sure. Yeah.
And you were covering the Rangers as well during the later Tortorella and early AV years.
Yeah.
It feels like so long ago now, but
it's funny. It really isn't, but it does seem like, for, you know, a different lifetime that Torts was coaching that team.
I want to start here with the Islanders discussion for you, Andrew, and where I want to start is before free agency, before we even got into the off season, all the talk with the Islanders was that they weren't even going to be able to go out and really acquire anybody because they had to lock up Pelech, they had to lock up Kulak, Cizikas, and the list goes on. And they had so much money tied up to guys like Andrew Ladd and Nick Leddy and somehow, and this is where I really want to start, Lou finds a way just to dump these contracts and open up money and
literally dump, by the way. Literally dump.
I mean, what is it? And I don't want to say what is it about Lou Lamoriello. We know what kind of general manager he is and how he turns every franchise he works with into a winner. But how did he find a way early on to trade off Leddy's contract, to get rid of Ladd's contract, so that this way he could go out and make the signings and re-up the guys that he needed to?
Yeah, I mean, to him, I mean, you know, the Leddy deal, that was a real sacrifice. Like, he, in no alternate universe did he want to lose Nick Leddy. You know, like, just like he did not want to lose Devon Toews. You can never have enough defensemen. So, you know, that was a giveaway, really. I mean, I know they got something back, but really it's not going to equal the fact that they don't have Nick Leddy back there, regardless of, I know Islander fans were up and down with Nick Leddy and, especially in his own defensive zone. There was a little bit of consternation with him. But really, you're not going to find someone who can skate like that and who can, transport the puck like Nick Leddy can. So that was a sacrifice on Lou's part that, he knew he had to make. Look, the Jordan Eberle in the expansion draft, if this was the Vegas Golden Knights draft, I think we would have seen Lou send something to the Kraken where he would have directed him elsewhere, because I don't think he really, he didn't mind losing the 5.5 off the cap because it gives him some ability to do other things, but now he needs a top line right wing in addition to a top 4 defenseman. The Andrew Ladd one was just like, oh my God. I had become conditioned to the idea that this was just an albatross of a contract. And I had even said, look, the likely outcome here has to be Ladd going on long-term injured reserve. They're going to let him go through training camp, and the doctors are going to say that his 2 knees cannot hold up to the rigors of an NHL season. And, that's how they're going to deal with Andrew Ladd. Leave it to Lou it was outside the box thinking. You take this, you take this draft choice, you take that draft choice, and we'll throw in another draft choice. No, we don't need anything from you. I mean, and I think you're going to see more and more of those kind of deals. I after that deal was made, I was, emailing a few people. I was like, I honestly can't remember a deal where nothing came back. There's usually, some they throw in a 7th round pick coming back just to make it a trade. I'd never seen just a one-way transaction like that. And the people I was talking to could not recall, anything like that either. And I think that's, in a way, I think that's why, his peers have voted him GM of the year 2 years in a row, because, other people, and when I say other people, like Islander fans went into the offseason panicking about the salary cap situation. Yes. Lou's not panicking. He's sitting there and objectively saying, what can we do? And nothing is impossible. Nothing is, off the boards. And, he came up with this idea of just, let's send everything. And, in Arizona was the perfect landing spot because, look, they're obviously tanking next season. They've accumulated, by my last count, 722 draft choices over the next 2 years. And, and they have $7 billion in salary cap space, so I feel bad for Arizona Coyote fans because, however many draft choices they have, like 2 first-rounders and 5 second-rounders, something outrageous. And that's still not going to help the team, no, for 4 years, right? So I don't know what Arizona's doing, and then they trade their goalie. So but that's a different subject. Arizona was the perfect landing spot, and you know what? Andrew Ladd might actually make that team. I mean, he's going to be given a chance. Why not?
And you know what, Andrew, you bring up a perfect point, because that, I don't want to say it started a chain reaction with Lou, but you also got to see what Philadelphia's general manager and Chuck Fletcher did, where he shipped off Shane Gostisbehere for literally nothing as well, which I guess on, with our good friends at Cap Friendly say future considerations. That's what it's, deemed here with the Ladd deal too, probably, as you said, just to, complete a trade, if you will. But again, you know, and then you look at that massive deal. Obviously, you don't want to change subjects, but you look at that massive deal too. You said 722 draft picks. You also bring in a ton of money, and who knows? You might see this new first line of Ladd, Louis Eriksson, and Clayton Keller. God help Clayton Keller, who just signed a long-term deal there too.
You know what? 12 seasons ago, that would have been a great top line.
Yeah.
It's true. Oh man. Well. Go ahead, please.
Andrew, you had mentioned that that this team is in dire need of a top defenseman and also a winger to replace Eberle. I guess this is a two-part question. The name that I feel like continually keeps getting linked back to the Islanders now that Landeskog is off the market is Vladimir Tarasenko.
Right.
And then the second part of the question is, do we see maybe Scotty Mayfield move up a pairing? Do we see, them move Andy Green around somewhere, or do you kick the tires again and see what like a Michael Dal Colle can do for you? So what's your take coming into next season for the Islanders at those two positions at this point?
Well, if everything is status quo, which is I know is a word Islander fans hate, but if everything is status quo, right? And you don't do anything besides what we think is going to happen, which is re-sign Cizikas, re-sign Palmieri, and sign Parise, right? And that's your off season. Does this mean that Wahlstrom is going to skate with Barzal and Lee? Because I would think that would be the case. And then Pajot probably gets Palmieri and Parise. You got the PPP line right there, right? And then, you can probably bring Travis Zajac back on a, probably the same deal as Andy Green's getting, 1 year, 725 against the cap. And Travis Zajac kind of becomes, with Ross Johnson, your 13th or 14th forward. Michael Dal Colle is an unrestricted free agent. I think the Islanders, it would have cost them nothing to qualify, but they were concerned about, him going to arbitration and getting more than the Islanders were willing to do. So, I mean, the Islanders technically could still bring him back. But if I'm Michael Dal Colle and the team is not qualifying me, I'm looking to see what else is out there at this point. Just like, Josh Hosang is finally, moving on. He's going to get a PTO with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And see how that goes. So yeah, and as far as the defense, I mean, it's still going to be Pelican Pulak and your anchors up top. Right. But now, the guy who maybe, benefits from Leddy leaving, although he's on the right side, so you would have to figure it out. But Noah Dobson, going into his third year, you got to think his minutes finally come up, and probably average closer to what, the Scott Mayfields and the Pellets and the Pulaks, and things are a little bit more even, although that Green Dobson, they love that pairing. I mean, when I say they, the coaching staff and Andy Green and Noah Dobson have a real comfort level together. One guy that no one is talking about who's still out there is Thomas Hickey. He's still under contract for another year. And I know, he's not Nick Leddy. He's not bringing the same things that Nick Leddy did. But in those 5 games he did play, Thomas Hickey showed you, that if maybe he's not, an every game defenseman in the NHL, he can still contribute and be a valuable member. They may wind up having to move him for cap purposes to squeeze a few more pennies off the cap. But I would think that, Hickey, if he's still around in September, comes to training camp with a real good chance of, earning some playing time here. Especially, look, the guy I would love to see the Islanders get, if they can work out a deal with the Kraken and trade for Vince Dunn, not to use an airplane reference, but over and done, right? That would be that would be fantastic, bringing in Vince Dunn, and I think your problems are solved with that. Obviously the Kraken are going to ask for a ton for him. So he's, if I'm recalling my mental notes correctly, he's still a restricted free agent too, I believe.
Yep.
So he's gonna be due a pretty nice contract as well. But if you could, somehow, you'd probably have to send the Kraken, a first or a second, or multiple draft picks, and then probably, a decent prospect. Maybe send a Bodie Wild out there. I'm sure they would ask for a Samuel Bolduc. I think the Islanders would be hesitant on the Bolduc thing. The Kraken might ask for Robin Salo. Maybe you do that, although I know they're high on Salo. I just don't think any of the Islanders' defense prospects are this September in training camp, solution. I think you're looking at them, more for 22-23 than you are for them in 21-22. So look, the Islanders are obviously in a win now proposition. So if that means having to send a Bodie Weil or a Robin Salo and a first or a second, and then maybe you send them, Thomas Hickey's contract as well, and see if that gets it done for Vince Dunn. That would be an avenue I'd be looking at.
That's definitely something there. DeLuca got a couple of questions here for Mr. Gross.
Yeah, sure do. I mean, AG, we certainly miss you in New Jersey, complete with everything. Miss your reporting.
It was a really good organization to cover. I will say that.
Yeah, but now I just think with the offseason finally kicking off, it's in full swing. It's going to be a very exciting time. What I'm wondering is if we all know Lou Lamoriello works in silence. Is he silently pursuing someone we're not thinking of that's available, right? That's known to be available, like a Vladimir Tarasenko, a Tomas Tatar, perhaps. Just someone in the free agent pool who's not been signed yet. David Krejci even, although I believe he is more than halfway done to go back to Boston.
Yeah, I think but no, you're right that Lou always throws that curveball at you, right? So I'm sure Lou loves the fact that the media is, kind of fixated on Vladimir Tarasenko right now, because I'm sure. Look, I know Lou has checked in with St. Louis. I know, he's probably checked back with St. Louis. He's probably checking on a daily basis, but I don't think that precludes Lou from, as you're saying, going a different direction and looking elsewhere. I don't know about Thomas Tatar. He's a decent player. I could definitely see Lou going a different way, and at the same time, I could also see Lou just doing, what we think he's going to do with Parise, Palmieri, and Cizikas, and then maybe get the Pelech done deal pretty quickly too, so that doesn't, usually with the restricted free agents, that the arbitration hearing date always serves as a pressure point. Hopefully they can get that done beforehand with Adam Pelech. And look, I know this is not necessarily your question, Rob, but with Adam, I think certainly the organization wants to buy years of unrestricted free agency right now. I think they want to get him in for minimum of 6 years at this point, I would think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
I couldn't agree more. Adam Pelech has shown that he's your top pair defenseman right there with Ryan Pulock. I think Ryan Pulock's actually one of the most criminally underrated players in the NHL right now, certainly for defensemen. He shows up right when you need him. So I think these are players that matter a whole lot to the Islanders, to Lou Lamoriello. It just, it makes you wonder. I assume he will go the status quo with Palmieri, Parise, And Palak, I do wonder though if there's, you always got to wonder with Lou if there's always that little side thing that he likes to keep to himself.
Yeah, and you know what? It might not be done. It might not be done now. It might be, in training camp.
There could be, exactly.
And it was funny. I was joking around, with Brian Compton at NHL.com the other day.
Yeah.
They were like, from a media standpoint, this is killing us. We're 48 hours into free agency, and I'm sitting on my thumb writing, the Islanders are silent story 2 days in a row, right? And just, kind of speculating here rather than reporting on hard facts. And it struck me, look, and I did check in with the league just to make sure that no player contracts had been registered with the league behind our backs, right? And I was given assurances that no, the only contract that has been registered by the Islanders so far is the new Andy Green deal, which they had to get done before the expansion draft. Now, the Islanders have still not announced the Andy Green deal, which, by the way, is $725,000 against the salary cap. And I was thinking, you know what? I don't recall them formally announcing Andy Green's last deal before last season. And then I was saying that to Brian Compton, and B-Comp goes, I'm still waiting for them to announce Matt Martin's deal. And that was a 4-year deal. And there's been nothing. There's been no official statement on that. So
that's really
it's a silent time over there at the island.
That's right. And as Rob DeLuca says, the Long Island Devils, or the New York Devils, what do you call them? The New Jersey Islanders.
They might as well be the New Jersey Islanders, especially if a name we haven't heard, which again makes me think he's coming back to the Islanders, is Travis Zajac, because he doesn't want to be done yet.
Well,
I know that.
Yeah, no, I mean, Travis Zajac is on that tier of free agents who will get done after everyone else.
Yeah.
There's no, and unfortunately, like our good friend Derek Stepan has kind of fallen into that range. I saw, Brian Boyle might even be drawing some interest now, but they're in that tier where when teams actually figure out how much money they have, that's when they can slot guys like Travis Zajac in. I was texting with someone else today. You're joking about the Islanders becoming, Devil's East, really. And we were talking about that, that Nick Leddy position.
Yeah.
And I got a text. He was like, John Merrill is still out there. Who drafted John Merrill? And then I was actually, and I like John a lot. I think he's a good player. He's, he's kind of had an up and down career, but he has some skills, right? And I was actually kind of relieved when I saw him sign with I think it was the Wild today, right? Because I was like, I know Islander fans are probably right on the precipice of losing their minds if they hear about, like, another Devil player coming into the fold, and so I texted this guy. I was like, well, Merrill just went to the Wild, and the text back was like, how about Murray?
They were. That's what was wild to me. Well, no words there, no pun intended. They were targeting Ryan Murray and landed with Dmitry Kulikov. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So my final two questions for you, Andrew. As an Islanders fan, I look to you for a lot of the Islanders resources. So thank you for everything that you do out here.
I was going to apologize.
Oh man, I'll tell you this. All of the interaction on Twitter that you, Arthur Staple, and B-Comp have, with all of the rock and roll tweets and everything, and B-Comp's love for Kiss, all good stuff. So please keep it going. But once the Nick Leddy deal happened and Richard Panik came back with the retained salary, 1.375 for the next two, I wondered how Ross Johnston would fit in, how Leo Komarov would fit in. And that's the part where obviously, the the goal light comes on and said, and you say to yourself, well, that means that Leo Komarov is probably going to be the next guy shipped out, because a couple of years ago, or even last year, Ross Johnston, as well as Oliver Wahlstrom, was that guy to, kind of flip-flop in the lineup, as well as Michael Dal-Cole. So now you've got Richard Panik in the fold now, and he is a very a veteran in this NHL. And now you've got Panik and you've got Johnston. And then if you bring back Zajac, where does that leave Komarov?
Yeah, my initial thought is we're doing this again with Uncle Leo, and opening night he's going to play with Lee and Barzell on the top line.
Oh God!
How many times have we written off Uncle Leo? Oh, this has got to be it for Uncle Leo. Look, I mean, just they don't want to get rid of the player, and obviously Barry can't fully explain this to us because we're not in the room all the time.
Yeah,
in the team setting, but Barry and Lou, and I should say all of Leo's teammates, there's a tangible intangible to Leo. He's like a glue in that room, and I really think they're a little bit afraid of what kind of slippage the team has if Leo is not in that room. To kind of you hear Jean Gabriel Pajot always talk about a brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
I think Leo Komarov is a big reason why it feels like a brotherhood in there. He's like your annoying older brother. He sits there with his wad of tobacco. The first time you don't really see a lot of hockey players with like a big wad of chew in their mouths anymore, right?
Yeah.
So the first time, I came and I talked to Leo in the room, I thought like his lip was permanently swollen because like a lot of these players, he had gotten a stick, he had received some kind of injury that had permanently like swollen his lip.
Yeah.
And then he took a cup and he spit out all this brown juice. And I was like, So look, he's in at $3 million for one more season, right?
Yeah.
Financially, the bean counter that we've all become because of the salary cap world says that the Islanders financially are probably better off if they can find a partner to take on Leo Komarov's salary. But I really think Lou is going to be very hesitant to do something like that, even with the Richard Panik here. And, if it comes down to Leo or Ross Johnson, I think they stick with Leo unless they absolutely cannot afford him, on the salary cap. There's just something about him. And again, I can't explain it because I'm not his teammate, but
right.
You talk to any one of his teammates and they, when I say adore, he gets under teammates' skins in a good way, just like he gets under Brad Marchand's skin in a bad way on the ice.
Yeah,
he's got that personality, and it's kind of crucial to have that kind of personality in the room on a championship level team. So I think that's where they value him. Him playing on the top line for ad infinitum, I still can't explain that. I didn't see what Barry Trotz saw. I'm not a coach, but I was like, you have you have this top line, Everly and Barzell, and the passes would go to Leo near the crease, and It's not his fault. He doesn't have the hand skills to convert there, right? It's not his fault. That's not him as a player, but analytics be damned, they loved it.
Yep. And on top of it too, listen, they made it. They were one goal really away from the Stanley Cup final. So, really all signs point up, fingers crossed, and see what happens over there.
Look, not to piss people off, but if they get the too many men on the ice call right there, it's still 0-0, and that game probably goes into overtime.
Well, I'll tell you this: you kind of aggravated me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it just brought back bad memories there. But
Joey's gonna have nightmares tonight now.
Yeah, right. Well, one final question here from one of our viewers, Andrew. Jason Weston asks, I know it's not free agency related, but thoughts on Simon Holmstrom possibly cracking the lineup this season, and also Ratu falling in the draft to the Islanders. Can he be an option in 2 years? What say you, Andrew?
I think both could be options, not this season, the following season. And I say that regarding Simon Holmstrom just because the AHL schedule was such a scramble last year that he only got 24 games in. I know sometimes forwards can get into the league a little bit quicker than defensemen. I still think they would like to give Simon Holmstrom a full AHL season to really develop here. And look, they have prospects in front of them still because you got, I don't know if you consider Oliver Wahlstrom a prospect at this point, but he's a young player who's ahead of Simon Holmstrom. You would think Kiefer Bellows is probably ahead of Simon Holmstrom also.
Say that.
And look, another guy we haven't talked about who could very strongly be in the forward mix, never mind Travis Zajac, would be an Otto Koivula.
Yeah.
Who I know the organization really, really likes. He can play all three forward positions. I could see him as a guy that, finally gets a chance as like an extra forward, cracking in. So I would think he's a little bit ahead of Simon Holmstrom as well. Different types of players. Holmstrom, obviously, his game is based on speed and playmaking and flying towards the net. And that's not exactly Koivula's game. Koivula probably projects as a bottom six forward in the NHL. But I obviously Simon Holmstrom will get a look in training camp, right? But I just feel like, one more year in Bridgeport will probably serve him best.
Yeah.
At this point. And Atu Rati, I asked Lou Lamoriello on the conference call, when you did all your mock drafts and, you sat in the war room and you figured out everything, was there any scenario where Atu Rati was available for you at number 52? And I couldn't quite get Lou to bite on that, but he did give me that he was quite surprised to see Roddy available at that spot. It could work out spectacularly well for the Islanders. I do think that it's not next season. Roddy said on his conference call he probably stays. Where's he in Finland, right? For this season, he's contracted for one more season there, so he probably plays over in that league one more season. But look, if he's figured out his issues, whatever they were, because we know he had a really down year, right? His performance in this, in this junior showcase this summer. From the moment he got picked, he had 2 goals in the first period of his first game, 4 goals. I think he's up to 8 points the last time I looked.
Yeah. That made Islanders fans very happy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's 2 things. One, the Islanders drafting him, I think was a needed boost to his confidence.
Yeah.
And 2, I think falling to 52 put a burr up his behind.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be really motivated. Like when I did my mock draft and my mock draft, emphasis on the mock, right?
Yeah.
But Colin Stevenson and I had him going in the mid-teens. We thought the Flyers might take a chance on him. I think at number 14, but I certainly by number 20, I thought he would be selected. And then he was just one of those guys where, it was probably bad word of mouth, and it sort of reminded me of when Lou was able to draft Bodie Wild, right?
Yes.
It was like, it was a no-brainer. Here's this talent that is ranked well above where you are now drafting in the draft. You kind of have to, don't overthink this. Just take the dude, and it's the second round anyway. So, at best, you're probably 50-50 getting a guy that's ever going to help you in the NHL anyway. So why not? I thought it was a good. I thought either him or take Jack Pert there. Those were my two guys who had really fallen out of kind of the first round, and I thought I thought it was a good pick by him. And like I said, I think Aatu Räty will be, if he continues to, kind of play the way he has played this summer, he could be a real find for the Islanders.
Yeah. Well, it's very funny, Andrew, that you bring up, like diamonds in the rough, because we remember back in 2015 when Garth Snow made a trade with Peter Chiarelli in Edmonton and got someone that is very well known on the New York Islanders in Matthew Barzal. So, we know all about the diamonds in the rough just because of a lower body injury where he was supposed to be Barzal in the top 5 just that year. And, one ACL tear completely destroys your top 10 hopes. And look where you are now as a number 15 overall draft pick. So who knows, man? Things really can happen, but we'll see what happens. So
yeah, but by the way, I don't think we can emphasize this enough. Boston totally screwed that up. If you have 3 consecutive picks in the first round, right? I don't care what your board looks like. If you have a talent like Barzal dropping, and you have 3 picks, it's not like, if you only have 1 pick, maybe you don't want to risk it. But it was 3 picks. It should have been a no-brainer for the Bruins there.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And now, unfortunately for them, they only have 2 out of the 3 that have made the show since that 2015 draft. But ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Gross covers the New York Islanders for Newsday. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and spending a few extra minutes with us here tonight. We really appreciate it, and we hope that there's some news tomorrow so you can get back to writing.
Hey, Joey and Rob, thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting with you guys.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back in the future.
You got my email.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Andrew. Yep, we'll speak soon. Thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the time has come here, and that was a ton of fun, guys. The NHL free agent frenzy has come to a close. Ian and DeLuca, all good stuff. Final thoughts from anybody? I think not. Ladies and gentlemen, for one final time, Ian Schraier and Rob DeLuca, I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us here at the Primetime Rundown and the Eastern Observer, as well as the Blackjack Media Group, we'll see you next time.